As a kid, Friday night sleepovers were what many looked forward to all week. There often wasn't anything better than uninterrupted time playing with friends and eating slices of pizza in between games. For Miranda Chappelle Farley, sleepovers were fun until the lights went out. When it was time for bed, her notorious snoring meant that no one wanted to be the one sleeping next to her.
They always hated being stuck next to me in the sleeping bags. And I had friends even tell me that it sounded like I stopped breathing during the night. But that was not anything I had ever heard of before. I felt fine. I was functioning during the day, playing sports. I wasn't really concerned. So I never brought those concerns to my parents or a primary care doctor. So in short, I thought I was sleeping well, but it seems that perhaps I was not.
And as Chappelle Farley got older, she continued to have no idea that she'd been living with sleep apnea. Unfortunately, this ignorance was not bliss. In high school, Chappelle Farley began noticing her attention problems. It took everything in her to be engaged during class and focus on her materials when studying, a pattern that continued into college.
I also struggled to wake up for my early morning classes and was chronically late because I had to stop for a triple red-eye coffee on my way every morning. I did actually go to a primary care provider and talk to them about how I was having difficulty paying attention. And they did suggest that maybe it was that I had ADHD. I find it interesting looking back now that never once did they ask about my sleep or think that maybe my sleep was to blame for the symptoms that I was experiencing. But it wasn't until I accidentally fell asleep at the wheel of my car that I became really concerned that maybe something else was going on.
Chappelle Farley's interest in memory and neuroscience led her to volunteering in a sleep lab during her undergrad. Through this work, she was introduced to the different types of sleep apnea and began to realize that many of her own experiences lined up with the patients diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea.
Obstructive sleep apnea is where the airway collapses, and that causes our oxygen level to fall or our brain to wake up.
That's Dr. Seema Khosla, medical director at North Dakota Center for Sleep. The second version of this condition is called central sleep apnea.
That's where your brain doesn't give you the signal to breathe. And we can see that with medications. We can see it with congestive heart failure. We can see it after a stroke. Most people have the obstructive sleep apnea kind that's far more prevalent than central sleep apnea.
There are a few notable symptoms of obstructive sleep apnea that many people think they can simply ignore and try to live with. But they can't turn a blind eye to the most serious outcome, which, in some cases, is death. When left untreated, the condition can cause heart attacks, heart failure, and stroke. Khosla says this looming threat is often a major source of stress for patients.
I have patients that tell me that, oh my gosh, the reason I use my machine is because I'm so afraid of dying and my wife finding me in the morning. I think there are so many emotional characteristics and really this emotional burden that we haven't evaluated extensively in the past.
In an attempt to rectify this blind spot in data, a group of experts and advocacy organizations created the SHINE survey. With 1,500 respondents all living with obstructive sleep apnea, this research is the largest psychosocial sleep survey ever conducted. Although the physical toll of the condition is well known, Khosla says this is an exciting look at the emotional burden patients carry.
I feel like sleep is a very intimate thing. And it is such an incredible privilege to have patients talk to us about their sleep, right? When we think about it, who watches you sleep? It's somebody that you're close to, somebody that you allow into that sacred space. And so when we start probing and our patients are generous enough to allow us in that space, we often talk about things that are very sensitive, that are very personal. And so I learn about both good and bad things. I learn about childhood sexual trauma. I learn about how their bed partner feels about their sleep disordered breathing or their treatment.
There are a few treatments for this condition, but Khosla says the gold standard is a CPAP machine, which stands for continuous positive airway pressure.
So when we think about what happens with obstructive sleep apnea, that airway is collapsing. And so the CPAP just splints it open. We also have mandibular advancement devices or oral appliances that our dental colleagues help us with. And these are worn, they look almost like Invisalign braces, and they just pull your jaw forward.
Patients can also have a device implanted in the neck and chest that stimulates a nerve under the tongue, which prevents it from blocking the airway. There are a couple medications currently undergoing clinical trials, but as with many other conditions, obstructive sleep apnea can also benefit from an overall healthier lifestyle.
When we really want to embrace treatment, we do address lifestyle. We talk about what time do you go to bed and what time do you wake up, and are you getting enough hours of sleep? We talk about how important exercise is in our sleep. We know that exercise, even if you don't lose weight, can help with obstructive sleep apnea.
Chappelle Farley says her experience with a CPAP machine has been life-changing. After years of struggling to pay attention in class, she couldn't believe the immediate difference she noticed after starting treatment. Education was a leading motivator in her diagnosis journey, which Khosla believes is important for physicians to understand. Knowing what both encourages and holds her patients back can better inform what treatment strategy is best suited for each individual.
I've always been a very active individual, so for me, I didn't change very much about my lifestyle. That being said, I did find other coping strategies. For example, I do tend to exercise in the morning now because I do find that it helps to boost my alertness throughout the day. Not to say that I'm super groggy in the morning, because my treatment has absolutely changed things for me, but I've just found that it's an extra boost that helps.
Many people have issues being vulnerable with their doctor. Researchers recently surveyed 3,000 people and found that more than half lie to their physicians. However, it's not always without reason. The SHINE survey reveals that young adults often feel misunderstood, which may make them hesitant to share intimate details about their health. Chappelle Farley says that her own diagnosis journey was made uncomfortable when she felt stereotyped by a medical professional.
I understand, you may be more prone to anxiety. Let's talk about that, right? Do we need to send you to a therapist? Do we need to send a letter to your primary care clinician just to let them know? And so it allows us to gently explore these areas that I think are sometimes closed off, both because we don't have enough time in a traditional clinic model, but also because I think you have to have a certain level of trust to share information about your sleep with someone else. A lot of the data in this world with sleep apnea was largely done on men. And so our understanding of what sleep apnea looks like is largely based on how it presents in men. And it's a conversation I have with many women in my clinic where maybe they were told by somebody that, oh, there's no way you have sleep apnea. You're too thin, you're too young, you're too female, only to find out that they really do have this significant burden of disease. But then on top of that, they have this burden of having to advocate for themselves. They have this burden of maybe feeling like, oh my gosh, maybe it is all in my head and this isn't a real thing.
Which contributes to the majority of patients surveyed reported feeling hopeless. Thankfully, this new data is informing physicians on the gaps in care and pitfalls of the patient experience so that changes can quickly be made.
At the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, we often will have a patient representative to share what it is like, not what we think it should be like, but what it actually is like. And I can't tell you how many times their comments have dramatically shifted what we do in terms of patient education, or even to shape the conversations I have with my patients in clinic.
You can find more information about the SHINE survey, Dr. Seema Khosla, Miranda Chappelle Farley, and all of our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. For more behind the scenes, follow Radio Health Journal on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farah. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Greg Johnson.